Last week we went over my gym mistakes, and this week I'm going to be covering my nutrition mistakes that I made when I first started going to the gym, started lifting, started training. At the time I was an amateur but aspiring professional golfer, so bear that in mind. I wasn't training for a bodybuilding show, but I was still very much a big gym goer. It was my outlet. I would go more than I do now, which is surprising, but obviously quality over quantity. Maybe it's a podcast episode for a different day. But it was my therapy. Even to this day, the gym is my therapy. I enjoy it. It's fun. I love growing. More on that later. But let's talk about the mistakes that I made when I first started going to the gym. And this is going to be nutrition focused. The first thing was I absolutely did not eat enough. I'm sure there's photos of me on social media from back when I first started lifting, or even when I became a professional golfer, and even when I was that spell of traveling and trying to get on tour. I did slowly gain, very, very slowly. There was still the fear of gaining fat, which again is definitely an episode I want to do in the future. But going back to when I first started, I was very much the all or nothing mindset. So when I was going to the gym, I was trying to get my nutrition on point, and for me that was eating less. And I just didn't eat enough. I definitely thought less was more. And obviously now I know that to grow, if you're trying to gain muscle, even if you're trying to preserve the muscle, if you're trying to lose fat, you still have to eat. Okay, so food is not the enemy. It is fuel. It serves its purpose. How much you consume will dictate what happens within those changes. So what changes take place. If you're in a surplus, obviously you'll gain. And if you're in a deficit, you'll lose. Now, if you're training, hopefully you are, you can gain muscle. And if you're not, you'll gain fat. That's kind of the dumb way of putting it, okay? But when I first started doing it, I definitely just didn't eat enough. And it got really bad to the point of borderline eating disorder, definitely symptoms, very much had a fear and anxiety towards a lot of foods. And I just didn't eat enough. I remember I would rely a lot on protein shakes just because they were low calorie and like pure protein. That's all I did. I was like just focused on getting, as much protein as possible with like as minimal calories as possible. So I would have so many shakes. And I'd have it like, in my oatmeal, and even then like the amount of oatmeal I had was like, tiny. I think it would maybe be like the one sachet of the Quaker oats. And then like lunches, it was always like maybe some like a can of tuna and then like a protein shake, which is just thinking about it now, I'm like, that was so stupid. But these are the mistakes I did, so hopefully you are learning from this. Don't do what I did. You definitely have to eat to fuel your body, whatever that is. Even take goals out of it, you have to eat for health. And I see this time and time again. Clients come in and either they've been trying to lose weight for a while and they've kind of plateaued, or they're wanting to lose weight and they're just not eating. I do see this more with my female clients, but they come in and they're hardly eating as it is. And I've mentioned this before, that our metabolisms are very smart and they'll match how much input we give it. So if you are chronically eating 14 to 1500 calories, your body will learn to operate on that. And now if that is a deficit for you, like if you feel like you're constantly on a diet, this is something that I felt, and your kind of hunger is always there, your food focus is always there, but you feel in control because you're like always eating this 14 to 1500 calorie day, then there's a lot of stress that comes with that. And stress, this can where the plateaus can stem from as well. When we're highly stressed, our body stores, okay? So to relieve the stress, that's why sometimes you just gotta eat more. You got to eat more, you start feeling hungry, your metabolism's woken up, and there you go, you've overcome your plateau. Going back to what I did, this happened to me. I actually, surprisingly enough, when I was at my lowest weight, I would never weigh in every day. I didn't really get caught up on the scale, I just avoided the scale. So did I plateau like scale weight wise? I honestly have no idea. But I know I definitely underate for a very, very long time. And even though I was working out, the hours upon hours I put in the gym were somewhat wasted. Now, you could argue that they aren't wasted because I learned what I did and it makes me who I am today, which I agree. I wouldn't change it. But when I think back, it is a little frustrating that I spent all that time trying to build and I just wasn't. The one thing I didn't have was like enough calories in my system to build. So bear that in mind, okay? Don't do the same thing that I did. Make sure you're fueling your body for your goals, whatever that looks like. Next mistake I did, and I've just mentioned this, was the all or nothing. Now, this is something that I try to teach my clients, is having flexibility within their diet. That's why I'm not a huge fan of meal plans. I have given them in the past. I can give example meal plans. I don't mind that at all, just to get people kind of some inspiration. But I'm not a huge fan of meal plans. I prefer a flexible dieting approach where essentially, if it fits your macros, you've got macro targets, proteins, carbs, fats, calories. And if you're consuming food that's within that, then you should be fine. Now, when I was first training and started diving into my nutrition, I was very much like, I'm on my diet, off my diet, zero flexibility. Like, there was a very strict type of food I would eat, and also how much of it I would eat. And even if I went like a little bit over, it was like, oh, I've blown it. And I remember I would feel guilty for it. This was where social events were just a nightmare for me. I remember the severe anxiety that would come along with it. And it's frightening to look back now, like how much I felt in control, but really I wasn't. Like, the food and training totally controlled me. And I can recognize that now when I see it in clients. Like, I can recognize that and we can kind of talk things through. But it's made me so passionate with this, like making sure that your diet, your goals fit into your life. And if they don't, we see it very quickly, okay? It's like if you had someone who is working as a nurse trying to become a professional golfer. Like, it's just not going to work. They may get the first week they may get a couple of hours practice and thinking they can do it, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's not going to work. So it's kind of like that. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but we're going to go with it. But having zero flexibility with your diet, being all or nothing, it is just not a good place to be. And it's something I still catch myself with, even to this day. Like, I'm very much a creature of habit. I like my routine, but I've noticed, like, if I slightly veer away from that, it's kind of like it feeds into other things, and some of those things may not be good. Almost like a snowball effect. And this can happen both ways. So it can happen in a good way and a bad way. I've seen the snowball effect, with most of my days. If I start my days out right, everything kind of just falls into place. I've got my routine and I'm fine. However, I've had days pretty recently, actually, I've been nursing some injuries, some health problems, and just recovering from, allergies, whatever is going on right now. And it just kind of snowballs until it came out of routine. And then that stops me from going to the gym, and that stops me from doing this. And I was like, okay, I'm out of that. There's none of that in my fridge. And it was just kind of all snowballed. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm sort of routine. What's going on? So it's amazing how things can spiral pretty quickly. But I'm learning to be flexible, to view this as it's growth. It's something I learn from. It's not the end of the world. If we just strive to do our best in every single situation, we're going to be fine. As soon as you start feeling that kind of rigidity towards your health and nutrition, and it's kind of causing that anxiety, then it might be time to just take a step back and be like, okay, what's really going on here? And like I said, I've had to do that a little bit more recently than what I like, mostly because of just my schedule has changed so much in the past few months. So, but ditching the all or nothing mindset and viewing this more as a long-term flexible approach where you can still have your social nights, going out with friends. There's just got to be some sort of boundary between, okay, I can enjoy this is where I'm good at, and I'm still hitting my goals. I don't feel deprived, but I'm not totally rigid with it. The next thing is following someone else's plan. And when I was reflecting and planning this podcast episode out, I just laughed at this so much, because I would do this and very as a naive 20-year-old, and social media obviously was there at that point. It wasn't that long ago. I would follow certain people and I would see what they were doing, and it's not a bad thing. You can learn a lot from these influencers or YouTubers, and it's not that it's wrong, but it's not. They're eating for their bodies. They're not eating for you. Okay. And that's why I emphasize to people, when people ask me what I eat in a day or what I'm consuming, I tell them here, this is what I do. However, eat for your taste preferences and your goals. Don't follow someone else's plan. It's like I said, it's not a totally wrong thing if you want to try it out and but make sure that it's not like, okay, I have to follow this because this is this person. This is what they did to get jacked. So if I eat this way, I'm going to get jacked. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Use it as influence. Okay. That's why they're called influencers. Just use it as influence, or inspiration, whatever you want to call it. One thing I noticed when I would do this is I would start comparing myself to that person. So let's just say there's an influencer and I followed her exact meal plan and she had a 6-pack. And I did this for a month, even though I'd never did it for a month. I would do it for like a couple of days and I'm like, I don't like this. But let's just say hypothetically I did it for a month and I didn't get a 6-pack. Now all of a sudden I'm comparing my body to hers the entire month. And you feel like crap because I'm never going to look like her. Just like you guys are never going to look like me, thank goodness. You're going to look like yourself. You're going to look like your best self if you follow the protocol for your body, okay? So really avoid comparing yourself to other people. Again, if you find yourself falling into that trap, just take a step back, put the boundaries up there, log out of Instagram, block them if you need to, but just don't compare yourself to other people. It's a dangerous trap to go down, and sometimes we can do it without even recognizing it. Okay, second to last one, kind of merging into the first one, but eating for control and not for health. So I've mentioned this in the past, but when I was really quote unquote in control of my nutrition, as in I was like severely restricted, I lost my menstrual cycle for 2.5 years. I absolutely ignored the signs of eating disorder, the anxiety that came with it, the guilt. Even like any family dinners that would come up, I would feel guilty. When it came to playing golf, that was really stressful. I had my on-course snacks, and if I didn't have them, it was like anxiety. Traveling for golf, that caused a lot of anxiety, which obviously affected my performance, which makes me a little bit sad to think that, I was so passionate about my golf and I really wanted to make it, on tour. And I've always kind of said this, the one thing that stood in my way was myself, my own brain got in my own way. And it's a little sad, like when I think back to it, but it is what it is. It led me on the path I am today, and it's that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, because I can help people, whether they're golfers or not. Just step out your own way and just let me take the reins, let me coach you, and you're going to be fine. So going back to eating for control, not health. So I fell into this trap of I was so focused on looking a certain way in the gym, performing a certain way on the golf course, that my health just totally took a back seat. And now that I'm out of that, I recognize health is number one by a long shot. If you don't have your health, you genuinely have nothing. You don't have the foundation to build muscle or lose fat. There's just if you don't have if your menstrual cycle is not there, and you're suffering from hair loss, low energy and fatigue, and your sleep is disrupted, your hormones are out of whack, your body's not going to put all the food that you do give it into building or losing, okay? So make sure that you are prioritizing your health. And one thing that can help with this is figuring out your why. Like I said, I did my first ever podcast episode, I did this, is finding your why. And typically it will stem from something to do with your health, whether that's mental health or physical health, okay? It could be a longevity aspect, it could be for your family. And if you're trying to get in shape for your family, whether it's grandkids, whatever the case may be, they don't give a crap if you have a 6-pack or not. They care about if you're healthy. And if you're not healthy, you're not reaching your goal. You're not going to be there for your grandkids, okay? So make sure that your goals or your why is at the forefront, okay? Not the 6-pack or whatever the case may be, okay? Listen to your body. We want to work with it, not against it, okay? And that is something that I preach to my clients, and I drill it into my brain as well, because that's something I'm not very good at either. Is when I'm on a hectic schedule and all of a sudden it's just I'm running around like a headless chicken, and I've got to be like, okay, Megan, take a step back. I know my body's trying to tell me something. You need to chill, okay? Last thing is stop sweating the little things, okay? I used to get so stressed out, especially when I started tracking, on every gram of protein, every gram of carb, every gram of fat, every calorie. And in the grand scheme of things, one, it's impossible to totally track accurately for everything, because even if you track accurately, you're weighing every single spinach leaf out, there's still margin of error. Your type of spinach may have slightly less, like 0.00001 less calorie than what a typical spinach leaf does in that app tracking database. Okay, so no matter how accurate you are, there's still room for error. Okay, and also how our bodies metabolize those things. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. That there's so many aspects that go into that. That how we track, it's just a tool, and there's loads of room for error for it. So there's no point sweating the little things. I used to sweat on, like I said, the calories and the grams of macros I was eating. The scale weight, that was very much something I went through my spell with that. That was very short-lived, thank goodness. But I definitely got caught up in the scale weight. That was right at the start of my fitness journey, or whatever you want to call it, is I would focus very much on the scale weight. You know, if it went up a day, I was like, oh my goodness, what the heck? And then I would like cut back calories, and then I would go back up, and it was just a whole mess. Make sure when you're looking at scale weight, you're looking at averages. So I would recommend, if you're in a fat loss phase, just looking at your averages per week. And hopefully you're within that 0.5 pound to a pound per week range, depending on what your goals are. But that's a good kind of rule of thumb. If you are trying to gain, if you're slowly gaining, if you're pretty lean already, then maybe 0.25 a pound per week is pretty good. It depends on the person. It depends on their experience. There's a lot of variables that go into my recommendations when I'm coaching people on the phase that they're in, and the goals they have. I don't just base it off their height, their weight, and kind of go from there. There's a lot of other variations that go into this. So make sure you're not kind of getting caught up in the nuances of scale weight and tracking. And like I said, even like little events as well. Like if you're going out for a dinner, like that's one meal. Like, in how many meals do you have in a day depends on the person. But let's say you have 4 meals a day. That's a quarter of your food intake from one meal. Why would we stress about it? I don't know how many meals that is in a week, and I'm not going to calculate it, but you can calculate that. It's one meal, out your life. That's not going to put on a crazy ton of fat. You're not going to be swayed from your goals. It's there. And learning how to enjoy these things, it's more of a mental practice more than anything. Okay, and like I said, I still have my days. Like I said, I'm very goal driven, so when I find myself like falling into this trap of like I'm trying to be in control again, and it's so interesting because I can feel it now, like I laugh about it. Years ago I did not laugh. I didn't recognize it, and then even when I recognized my control, I did not laugh. But now I can laugh about it. But it's a skill that you learn over time. Okay, and the more reps you get in, the better you get at it. Okay, and then you start trusting the process, and then you can realize like, okay, like I can eat this, enjoy myself, have a couple of drinks, and I'm not going to be putting on a crap ton of fat. Even if the scale is up the next day or two, okay? I can just pull back a little bit here. Or like, oh, I know it's just a little bit up because we had a really salty dinner that night. Okay, so there's so many variations and variables that go into these tracking mechanisms, so don't treat them as the gospel. They're there as tools. They keep us in check, but they do not account for everything that's going on. That's why it's good to have a lot of different things kind of being measured, but also having someone in your corner that you can talk to if you do happen to be like, okay, like the numbers are great, however, I feel this way. Or like, I feel this way and the numbers aren't showing it. Okay, so it's good to have someone in your corner. I've said this before, I am an online coach. I do in-person training as well. For those of you that are interested, just head over to my Instagram page. I have spots open for my online coaching. I've got really exciting things in the works this year that I'm very, very excited to share with people. So if you are interested, make sure you're following me on Instagram. You can follow along on my bodybuilding journey, and also hopefully some good valuable content for you there. You can get an insight into what I do, why I do it, and why I'm a little bit different than other coaches out there. You won't see me flashing my booty on Instagram. I like to be educational, but also give an insight into the mindset behind training, the mindset behind reaching your goals, to life, just anything. I'm a thinker, and I always say that the body will follow the mind. So if we can get our minds right, we're going to be crushing our goals. So I'm going to wrap up the episode there. If you do like it, make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next week.